Welcome to the Armani Talks YouTube channel. I'm your host, Armani Talks. In this channel, I'm covering communication skills in order to help you improve your way with words. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome aboard. Every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I drop a new video on impromptu speaking skills, storytelling, writing skills, and many more other topics to help you become a much more confident communicator. If those subjects interest you, be sure to drop that subscribe right on below. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back to this channel, and be sure to drop that like for me right on below. Today, I'm going to be talking about the number one enemy of clear speaking skills. You ever heard of that one quote? If you want to improve something, you must be able to measure it. I have a little remix to that quote. If you want to overcome something, you must be able to verbalize it. Let's imagine that you're in a work meeting, and on this particular work meeting, everyone is speaking up. Different individuals are raising their hands, they're giving solutions, giving their feedback, they're participating. Now there's another person in this room that's very quiet, just like yourself. And normally this person isn't talking, just like yourself. But on this particular meeting, even this other quiet person is raising their hand, giving feedback, participating, bringing more awareness as to why you're the only person in this meeting that's not participating. After the meeting is done, you start to think, man, there were so many different opportunities when I could have said something. I should have said this when Billy was making this point. I could have said this when Janice was making this point. And then you start asking yourself, why was I not clearly speaking when I had so many different opportunities? And that's when you feel certain tension. You're trying to verbalize it, but you can't. You're trying a little bit more, but you can't. And at this stage, there's plenty of people who just stop. That's when their mind becomes distracted with something else, another deliverable for their work, and they completely forget how they were trying to express the discomfort, but they couldn't. Today, this video is going to shed light as to why you are not clearly speaking. It's because of a thing called clutter. Wait a minute, Armani, you're telling me my messy room is making me a poor communicator? No, that's not how I use clutter in today's video, although you should be cleaning your room. Clutter, for today's definition in this video, is anything that causes resistance between your idea and you expressing yourself. This is us verbalizing this weird effect that we had at that work example. Okay? So simply by us creating a label for this weird little tension, now we have made it real to us. Now we can manipulate it and we can discover more as to what this clutter is. Now, before I talk about clutter in the speaking example, for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to share a story with you that is going to talk about clutter in a different sort of context. And what I want you to do is just look out for a lot of analogies that I'm going to be dropping. By understanding these analogies, or at least looking out for it, not only are you going to be more engaged, you're also going to understand when I'm bringing up clutter in the speaking context. This story is going to speak to your subconscious mind first, and the clutter example is going to speak to your conscious mind, which will lead to a holistic learning experience. If you're ready and excited for today's video, go on and drop that like for me right on below. A lot of the years as I was an engineer, I came to notice that there weren't too many women that worked in the field, specifically in the IT department. Within one of the companies that I worked in, most of the women would work in the operations side or the business analyst side, and most of the men would work in the IT sector. But there was one woman who stuck out. Her name was Sangeeta. And that's who the story is about today. Sangeeta was roughly 5'2". She would always wear this pantsuit, and she carried herself sort of like a little boy. And by boy, I don't mean this in a mean sort of way, but she had this mannerism of trying to always act like a guy. And she would give you a handshake like this and squeeze on your palm. And she would speak in a certain way where if you cut off her hair, you couldn't tell if this was a woman or if this was a legit boy. I think she was acting like this because subconsciously a part of her knew that she was in this male-dominated industry and she wanted to prove that she belonged. Sangeeta was roughly 35 years old and was always very disciplined. A part of me thought that she might have been in the army or something before, just by the way that she carried herself. Now, in the beginning, I didn't directly work with Sangeeta. I would sit by her and see her interact with different people on her team, but I would never directly work with her. And for some strange reason, I had a very weird perception regarding Sangeeta. I thought she was a little weird, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I decided that I didn't want to judge too soon. As more and more time started to go by and work, I eventually got involved in a project where Sangeeta was the product owner for. And if I wanted to work on this project, I had to go to Sangeeta a lot and ask her different questions. The more and more that I asked her questions, the more that I realized that my initial judgment was wrong. Sangeeta was dope. She was extremely disciplined, but she was very empathetic, very charismatic as well. And she would go out of her way to make sure that I understood her system very well. The more and more that we talked, I made a very shocking realization one day. I came to learn that Sangeeta, we would all work in Tampa, but she lived in Orlando, which was an hour and a half away. This basically meant that she had to drive an hour and a half to work, an hour and a half back to her house. And I was like, why? Why don't you just live in Tampa? And that's when Sangeeta said that her son has a very rare sickness where the only doctor that treats that particular sickness lives in Orlando. But due to her career and the type of technology that she specializes in, there's not that many job opportunities for her in Orlando. So she's routinely working in Tampa. That's when I had to ask. I'm like, why don't you ask to work from home or something? Why are you always driving this far day in and day out? And that's when you could tell she was getting a little irritated. She's like, trust me, I tried. But routinely, the upper management keeps on shutting me down. They say that they want to build a team camaraderie at the office, and me working from home is going to hurt this. And you know what's even worse, Armani? I only said that I want to work 2 days out of the weekdays. Not the whole weekdays, but just 2 days. And I could tell that as she was just bringing this up, it was making her blood boil. You could tell this was truly pissing her off. So I decided I was going to change subjects. But within her mind, the wheels started to spin. Within the next couple of weeks, Sangeeta started to speak to her upper management more and more about working from home. And more, you could tell the upper management was not buying it. She would tell her different teammates what she was speaking about, and she would eventually reach a conclusion. I'm going to give an ultimatum, she thought. I'm either going to get this working from home option, otherwise they're going to have to let me go. This was the ultimatum that Sangeeta said that she was going to tell her managers. And she did. Guess what happened? Sangeeta was fired. Yep, she was fired. And it was extremely sad to witness because she was such a top performer within her field. Yet, when she gave the ultimatum to her bosses, they didn't even think twice about firing her. Now, there's a lot of analogies in this little story that I gave you. But what I want you to understand is that Sangeeta was a top performer in her job. Okay, this was crystal clear for her. Yet, the clutter within her life in context of the job was the hour and a half driving to her work and away from work, to work and back to home. And no matter how crystal clear she was for this job, it was eventually the clutter which led to her demise. And likewise, for a lot of different people that are trying to improve their speaking skills, their message is crystal clear in their mind, yet there's a certain kind of clutter which is holding them back. And the more that we can keep on working on this clutter, the more that we start to reduce our driving time to work. See, the standard approach is, all right, let me just go to the speaking skills first. But you really want to address what kind of clutter that you have in respect to your life. Now, everyone's clutter is different. When I was first working on my speaking skills, I noticed that my clutter was whenever I was speaking, for some strange reason, I always thought I looked ugly while speaking. Now, even if I was speaking on a topic that I was crystal clear about, I could be just talking about myself. The clutter of me thinking that I looked ugly was hindering me from speaking clearly. You wonder why I call this the number one enemy of clear speaking. So once I was able to verbalize, okay, my clutter is looking ugly while I speak, I was able to take a few action steps. One, I took my butt to the gym and I started to work out. This built more self-confidence in how I look. But then I started to do some research. I was like, man, is this a thing? Do other people ever think they look ugly when they're speaking? As a matter of fact, they do. There's a phrase called the illusion of transparency. And this is basically when you think internal nerves are leaking out to the public, which is one of the driving factors of you thinking you look ugly. It's called illusion for a reason. So once I was able to get clarity on my kinds of clutter, that's when I was able to see, this clutter is sort of just disappearing on its own. And once it was starting to disappear, that's when I was able to speak more clearly as a byproduct. Now, for another person that I know that I'm going to use a different example. I'm going to use the example of writing. For this particular individual, he wanted to start a Twitter account. Him and I started our Twitter accounts on the same exact day. But our approach was completely different. For me personally, I just started writing tweet after tweet after tweet, while this guy got a huge course on how to write tweets. And every single time that he would write a tweet, he would go on the data analytics, he would analyze the numbers, break down the numbers, and he would keep overthinking the numbers so much to a point where he would write one tweet every 3 weeks. So he wasn't able to understand why he was struggling to write tweets. But just looking outside in, I was able to see that his clutter was preparing too much. He was an overthinker. And due to being an overthinker, he just wasn't taking enough action. So this is a different sort of clutter which has been introduced for this particular individual. Now, for other people, it could be simply because they don't know the topic well enough. That's their clutter. Whatever you are getting from this video, I want you to understand that it's very easy to first be like, okay, my speaking skills are lacking, but you may want to think, what is your personal clutter? Are you someone who thinks you look ugly while speaking? Are you someone who has to prepare too much and you're not able to think on your feet? Are you someone who doesn't know the topic well enough, which is leading towards imposter syndrome? There's different ways to be able to approach this. But the more that you can clarify your clutter and start to take some incremental progress towards it, the more that you're capable of speaking better as a byproduct. And sometimes you'll notice that this clutter is actually not that bad. It's actually very, very good. An example is if you're someone with an accent. Many times, people with an accent know their subject inside and out, yet they're very sloppy speakers because most of their mind bandwidth is on this clutter thinking, man, are other people noticing my accent? They may be noticing it, but who's to say that they're noticing it in a negative way? There's never a 100% ratio towards anything. No one, even the best voice out there, Mariah Carey, Beyonce, every single person in the planet is going to be like, oh, I love her voice. So for the person with the accent, they could be like, okay, well, this is my clutter, self-doubt in regards to accent. I think that other people are noticing it a lot, but who cares? This could actually be my leverage, because now other people with accents are resonating with me more, and people without an accent are being like, I never heard that sort of tone before. Let me listen to this person a little bit more. So suddenly, this clutter turned into something that is now leverage, which influences proper speaking skills. So the summary of today's video is that we as speakers have to understand that there is an enemy out there, and the enemy will never be conquered unless we can verbalize what it is. And to start the journey towards verbalizing, we have to call it clutter. And you could call it whatever you want. I just like this phrase because it's something that speaks to me. And once we identify that this clutter is holding us back from our goal of clear speaking, that's when we can constantly keep crystallizing it more and more and more. Us crystallizing it is sort of like Sangeeta reducing her driving space more and more and more. And the more that we do this, the more that clear speaking is on the horizon. So find out what your clutter is in respect to your life, do more research on it, do more work on it, and every now and then acknowledge that this clutter may actually be leverage, and from there, speaking skills will be a byproduct. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to check out my free ebook, The Confident Communicator, which introduces different steps on how you can become much more articulate, much more polished, and much more confident every single time you're uttering your words. The free ebook will be available in the description box and the pinned comment right on below. Thank you for joining the Armani Talks YouTube channel, and I'll catch you on the next episode.